Axel Stone had always known that Earth was a death world, a place where survival was a constant battle, where everything from the environment to the wildlife fought relentlessly to end your life. But standing in the center of the Galactic Defense Academy, Axel wasn't sure whether he was the one who was out of place, or if the vast array of alien species around him were the ones who didn't belong. He adjusted his uniform, a perfectly fitted combat suit with the insignia of the Galactic Union emblazoned on the chest, and surveyed his surroundings. The Academy was far more advanced than anything Earth had produced, but it still had the sterile, clinical feeling of a place built for efficiency over comfort. The walls were white, smooth, and perfectly aligned, the air thick with the scent of ozone and synthetic materials. Above, floating holosigns projected instructional images in several languages, each one designed for a species with vastly different physiology. Axel wasn't sure what to make of the alien cadets standing beside him. His fellow recruits were an eclectic mix of interstellar warriors, tall, six-armed amphibians from Rautho, lizard-like serpentine soldiers from Grex, and shorter, round-bodied beings from the peaceful planet of Alithos. He could see their eyes darting nervously, sizing him up, but Axel didn't flinch. He'd been through worse. He had to be the toughest cadet in the room, and he knew it. He glanced to his left, where a massive figure, Shrakra, the drill sergeant, bloomed over the group. The insectoid alien's exoskeleton was a deep shade of red, and his mandibles clicked as he surveyed the humans and the other recruits. Shrakra was known for his brutal training methods, respected and feared throughout the galaxy. He was a seasoned veteran of the galactic wars, and his reputation as a drill sergeant was legendary. But Axel had never cared about reputations. The Shrakra's antennae twitched as his eyes locked on Axel. His mandibles flared, and he spoke in a gravelly voice that resonated through the room. "Earthling," he began, his gaze narrowing, "I hope you're prepared to face the most difficult trial of your life. Here at the Academy, we don't tolerate weakness. If you can't handle our training, you'll find yourself discarded like the rest of the failures who came before you." Axel met Shrakra's gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to fail." The silence in the room was palpable, broken only by the slight hum of the automated systems overhead. The alien cadets seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief, perhaps assuming that Axel was confident, or perhaps because they thought his bravado was typical of human arrogance. But Axel had already learned what they had yet to figure out. Earthlings didn't flinch. Earthlings didn't break. Earthlings survived. The first day of training began under the oppressive heat of the artificial desert simulation. The Academy's simulators were equipped with technology so advanced it could recreate entire ecosystems with the push of a button, but to Axel, they felt almost laughable. Earth was far more unpredictable. The wilds of his homeworld had prepared him for every kind of environmental hazard imaginable: extreme heat, acidic rain, razor-sharp winds, and more. The others around him struggled. One cadet, a tall amphibian from Raltho, collapsed from dehydration after only a few hours. Others succumbed to exhaustion, the heat sapping their energy, making it hard to concentrate. But Axel? He didn't sweat. He didn't flinch. He moved steadily through the sand, finding shelter from the scorching sun and tracking the scarce resources available. Shrakra was watching him intently, his many eyes blinking rapidly as he studied Axel's movements. The rest of the cadets had fallen behind, some of them barely crawling forward, but Axel was pushing ahead, not out of pride, but simply because it was instinct. To him, the desert simulation was just another day in Earth's harshest climates. It was during the second simulation, a dense jungle with plants that could rip you apart with a single swipe, that the others began to truly notice Axel's abilities. They were walking through thick vines, trying to avoid aggressive wildlife, when Axel moved like he had done this before. He ducked under branches, sidestepped thorn-covered bushes, and expertly navigated the terrain, his movements swift and precise. "Watch him," whispered a cadet from Grex. The small, round creature was trying desperately to keep up, but was being hindered by the thick foliage and the venomous creatures lurking beneath the leaves. "I don't understand how he's doing this," the Ralto cadet murmured, still staggering behind. He had been reduced to walking on all fours, a far cry from the proud warrior he had been when they first entered the jungle. Shrakra observed Axel's progress with an almost cautious curiosity. The instructor had seen Earthlings before, but not many had ever passed through the academy. Most died before making it past the first few days. Axel, however, seemed to be unaffected by the deadly environment. He approached the dangerous plants, testing them with a stick to find safe routes through the thickets. There was a calmness to his movements, an assurance that puzzled Shrakra. By the time they reached the jungle's end, Axel was the only one still standing, and he looked almost unscathed, a faint trace of dirt on his combat suit. Shrakra's mandibles clicked together in irritation. "You are impressive, Earthling," he admitted. "But the next challenge will be far more difficult. Do not grow complacent." Axel simply nodded. "I'm ready." The final challenge came sooner than expected. Axel had been moving through each trial with alarming ease, but Shrakra had one last simulation in mind. A survival exercise in an asteroid field. It was the most brutal, unforgiving test the Academy had. The cadets would have to work together to navigate an asteroid belt filled with constant debris, volatile temperatures, and radiation hazards. The others, fatigued from the previous days, immediately began to panic as they were thrust into the dark void of space. Axel, on the other hand, didn't hesitate. He immediately focused on the task at hand. He synchronized his suit with the Academy's flight systems and guided the others, one by one, through the maze of floating rocks and debris. They needed to stay on course, keep their shields intact, and avoid the gravitational anomalies that would pull them into the void. For the first time since the beginning of the course, Axel had to rely on the alien cadets for support. It wasn't that they weren't capable, they were, but Axel had been trained to think quickly and act decisively in dangerous, unpredictable environments. His mind worked faster than theirs, anticipating threats and calculating escape routes in ways no alien had considered. "Go left now," Axel ordered, his voice calm but commanding as a massive asteroid neared, threatening to tear through the field like a knife through soft flesh. The Grex cadet hesitated, then followed Axel's lead, just in time to avoid a collision. The others fell in line, trusting Axel's judgment. But Shrakra was beginning to grow uneasy. His antennae twitched erratically as he watched Axel's every move. The instructor had expected chaos. The cadets were supposed to fail, to struggle, to learn from their mistakes. But Axel was not failing. Axel was leading. By the time the asteroid field simulation was over, Axel had guided every cadet safely through, a full hour ahead of schedule. They landed back at the Academy's base, and Axel removed his helmet, taking a breath of cool, recycled air. His heart rate had barely spiked during the exercise. The others, however, were sweating and panting, their faces drained from the exertion. Shrakra stood before Axel, his mandibles clicking together, a mixture of admiration and frustration in his eyes. "I don't understand," Shrakra finally muttered. "How did you do it? How did you finish the course in less than an hour?" "Ah." Axel glanced up at him, his face a mask of calm confidence. "I did what I had to do." Shrakra stared at him for a long moment, his insectoid mind struggling to process the answer. But one thing was certain. Axel Stone, a Deathworlder from Earth, was a force to be reckoned with. And that realization terrified him. Axel Stone stood at attention, his boots pressing into the slick metallic floor of the Galactic Defense Academy's training chamber. Around him, a sea of cadets from every corner of the galaxy shuffled nervously, adjusting their suits, checking their weapons, and glancing warily at the towering insectoid figure that was their drill sergeant, Rockcrow. Axel didn't need to see the others to know they were tense. Their body language gave it away. Some were practically shaking, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. The strange alien species, raised in environments that lacked any true threat to their survival, had no idea how to prepare for what was coming. The Galactic Defense Academy was supposed to be the toughest military school in the known universe, a place where only the most elite soldiers were forged. For most cadets, it was a series of brutal trials designed to test endurance, strategy, and teamwork. They would face hostile environments, alien beasts, and the deadliest combat simulations possible. But what Axel had learned, more than anything, was how out of touch the Academy was with the reality of actual survival, especially the kind of survival that humans had to endure on Earth. Axel's own eyes locked onto Shrakra, who towered above the group, his red exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lighting. His 6 arms folded across his chest in a posture of authority, and his multifaceted eyes glistened with barely contained disdain as they scanned the group of recruits. The insectoid drill sergeant's antennae twitched briefly before he barked out orders in his deep, gravelly voice. Today you will face your most difficult challenge yet, the Javkra Expanse, a simulated wilderness environment teeming with hostile flora and fauna. You will be dropped onto the surface and you must survive for the next 48 hours. No food, no water, and no assistance. Axel felt the eyes of his fellow cadets flicker toward him. He didn't flinch. The others were nervous, terrified even, but Axel knew better. He'd seen worse, far worse, back on Earth. He had lived through some of the most unforgiving and brutal environments in the universe. Alien wildernesses, no matter how dangerous, were no match for the chaos of his homeworld. Shrakra's antennae twitched again, a sharp movement that signaled the beginning of their trial. The sound of the activation sequence rang in the air, and the simulation room's walls began to ripple, folding away like paper as massive screens shifted to life around them. The air thickened, the temperature increased, and the smell of sulfur and decay permeated the space. The dry heat of a desert wasteland enveloped them, followed by the distant, bone-chilling howls of unseen creatures. "Remember," Shrakra's voice cut through the noise, "you will be marked by your success or failure here. Only those who complete the course within the designated time frame will earn their place in the Academy's ranks." Axel stood still, his breathing slow and steady. The others around him were already starting to fidget, their fear palpable as they heard the sounds of large, invisible predators in the distance. But Axel was prepared. He pulled a survival pack from his side, checking the contents with practiced hands. A basic utility knife, a small energy torch, an emergency beacon, and a few nutrient packs. All the essentials, nothing extraordinary. But it would be more than enough. After all, Axel had spent years in the wilderness of Earth's most hostile regions. A few alien simulations wouldn't break him. The drop was sudden, the ground beneath his feet shifting as Axel's vision blurred with the light of the simulation chamber's transition. When the haze cleared, he found himself standing on the barren landscape of the Javka Expanse, a rocky desert littered with sharp outcroppings and dangerous creatures. The sky above was an unnatural shade of green, casting a sickly pallor over the jagged terrain. Around him, other cadets were already beginning to panic, some scrambling for cover, others clutching their throats, as if the air itself was poisoning them. Axel didn't move. He stood still for a moment, surveying the environment. To his right, an insect-like creature about the size of a human crawled across the ground, its many legs skittering erratically as it sniffed the air. A predator, judging by its movements. Axel's gaze followed its path. No one had trained him for this. His instincts were too sharp, honed by years of survival in much harsher environments. A soft beep sounded from his utility pack. A small sensor on his wrist indicated the presence of a hostile creature. A Javkra strix, a large predatory lizard known for its aggressive tendencies. Axel's eyes narrowed. He didn't need to wait to see it. He knew what to do. Without hesitation, Axel dropped to one knee, his fingers moving quickly to retrieve his knife from his pack. He spun the blade in his hand, testing its weight, before using the natural cover of the jagged rock to circle behind the creature. It was moving closer, drawn by the scent of another cadet. Axel's eyes scanned the ground as he crept toward it, using the shadows to mask his movement. He timed his steps, each one measured and silent. A sharp shriek echoed in the distance, another cadet's scream as they encountered one of the Strix. The creature turned its head in the direction of the noise, distracted. That was Axel's moment. He moved with terrifying speed, the blade slicing through the creature's neck in a single, fluid motion. It collapsed without a sound, its body twitching for a brief moment before it lay still. Axel wiped the blade clean on the creature's tough hide and moved on. He knew there was no time to waste. The rest of the cadets would be too busy panicking to survive for long, and their chances of completing the course were quickly dwindling. He glanced back to see the Grex cadet, a small, round creature that had been struggling since the beginning, swirling over the rocks and collapsing to the ground. Axel could hear the frantic calls of the other aliens as they tried to regroup, but he didn't have time to help. Survival was about instinct, and instinct told Axel that this was every soldier for themselves. His eyes flicked to the horizon. There was a thick, twisting jungle in the distance, a safe zone where he could rest for a while before moving on. Hours passed. As the sun set in the simulated sky, the temperature dropped drastically. The environment shifted, going from a scorching desert wasteland to a freezing barren tundra, complete with blizzards that reduced visibility to zero. Axel's survival instincts kicked in once more, and he quickly found shelter in a cave he stumbled across while navigating the shifting environment. He took stock of his supplies, a few nutrient packs, some basic first aid supplies, and a thermal blanket. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get through the night. He huddled inside the cave, using the blanket to keep warm, while his mind raced over the events of the day. At first he thought the simulation had been a test of physical endurance, but now he understood it was something far more dangerous, a test of mental resilience. The Javkra expanse wasn't about surviving the environment. It was about breaking the mind of the cadet, pushing them to their limits, forcing them to question their own ability to survive. It was about fear. The cold pressed in on him as the storm outside raged, but Axel wasn't afraid. On Earth he had faced worse. He had been stranded in similar conditions, far colder, far more dangerous, and he had survived. He wasn't going to break now. The next morning the simulation shifted again. The temperature surged once more and the blizzard stopped as the landscape transformed. The reality of the simulation became clear. The Academy wasn't just trying to test the cadets physically, it was testing their ability to adapt to unpredictable, hostile conditions. The Javkra expanse was an environment that constantly changed, a world where nothing could be relied upon. Axel knew that his ability to think quickly and adapt was the key to survival. As the hours ticked by, more cadets fell behind, their bodies and minds succumbing to the stress of the environment. The panic in the air was palpable, but Axel's mind remained clear. He moved forward with precision, making his way through the ever-changing environment, finding the safe zones and avoiding the dangers that others were falling victim to. When he finally reached the finish line of the course, after only 2 hours, he was stunned to find that no one else had managed to even come close. The others were scattered across the expanse, some still struggling to complete the first leg of the journey. They were exhausted, broken. Shrakra stood waiting at the finish line, his eyes wide with disbelief. Axel approached, his boots crunching on the gravel. You did it," Shrakra muttered, his voice laced with confusion. Axel simply nodded. "Told you I wasn't here to fail." Shrakra stood in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling in. Axel Stone, the Deathworlder from Earth, had completed the impossible task, and the realization hit hard. Axel's experience, his instincts, his sheer will to survive had shattered the expectations of the Academy. And for the first time in his career, Shrakra felt a flicker of true uncertainty. The simulated war zone was chaos incarnate. The ground shook as bombs exploded, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. Holographic enemy soldiers, fierce and highly trained, moved through the chaos with deadly precision, while automated drones hovered above, scanning for any signs of life. The battlefield was designed to overwhelm the cadets' senses, to make them second-guess every decision they made, forcing them into a corner where they would eventually make a mistake, and that mistake would be their last. Alex Cutter stepped into the war zone. His heart beat steady. His eyes darted across the battlefield, taking in every detail with uncanny precision. He moved like a ghost, navigating the deadly landscape with the confidence of someone who had been here 1,000 times before. The sergeants watched from their control room, their faces tense as they monitored his every move. What they didn't know was that Alex was doing more than just surviving. He was analyzing the entire environment, breaking down the patterns of the enemy forces with military precision. "It's too easy for him," Kixel said, his tone filled with both admiration and fear. "He's reading the battlefield like a strategy game. No cadet has ever done this before." "He's predicting the enemy's movements," Yalas added. "How is that even possible?" Alex moved swiftly, taking out enemy forces with methodical strikes. He didn't hesitate. He wasn't just reacting to the situation, he was controlling it. When a blast sent an enemy soldier flying, Alex was already several steps ahead, positioning himself to ambush the next target. His mind was operating at a level of efficiency that the sergeants couldn't comprehend. By the time the final wave of enemies arrived, Alex had cleared the battlefield. There were no remaining threats. The war zone, meant to be the ultimate test, lay silent and still. The lead drill sergeant checked the clock. It had been only 1 hour. Alex walked back into the command center, his eyes scanning the room. The sergeant stood in stunned silence. "Mission complete," Alex said, his voice calm, almost casual. "Is there a harder test?" The silence was deafening. The sergeants could only exchange looks of confusion and alarm. They had trained for decades to create a test that no soldier could complete in less than a week. And yet this human had finished it in an hour. Something wasn't right. And for the first time since the hegemony had created its training facility, the drill sergeants were genuinely scared. What kind of human had they brought here?